الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. One of the issues that we have as a Muslim community living in the United States is a lack of understanding truly of some of the thoughts and perceptions of the greater community around us. And the way that we solve that is through data, through surveying, right? So there are many organizations that do surveying and try to get data to understand what is going on so that you can have an effective strategy for dealing with the problems. So, for example, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, they did a survey not long ago about American Muslim perceptions of themselves and how American Muslims have internalized Islamophobia, for example. The best example of that, I like to joke, is when I'm at the airport and I'm traveling and I see a little old grandmother getting pulled over for the extra screening, I think, oh guys, come on, you're looking for me. Why are you harassing this old grandmother? So this is called internalization of this Islamophobia or this issue. I shouldn't be thinking like this, but because the society has socialized that Muslims are an issue, it becomes socialized and even ingrained within the Muslim psyche. So recently, Brother Shahid Rahman from American Muslim Institution invited us to attend a gathering to discuss a survey that was being conducted nationwide by New America Foundation. They are a nonpartisan think tank. They tend to lean progressive and liberal. They tend to lean that way. And they conducted a survey nationwide about American non-Muslim perceptions of American Muslims. And they had a focus where what they call an oversampling. So there were 1,700 people that were surveyed. And they did what's called an oversampling, which means you take an extra sampling of the Washington, D.C. area. So you have an idea of how that area compares to the overall survey results. So, unfortunately, Bobby McKenzie, who conducted the study, had an emergency and he didn't make it, but Shahid worked with him on this study. So we're going to have Brother Shahid go through some of the top line results of the survey so we get an idea of what the results are and what people's perceptions of us are. Before we start, I want to ask a question. How many of you here think that our area is a very tolerant area? I mean, this is my thought, right? We think we're very tolerant. We think it's a cosmopolitan area, that there's a lot of diversity in the DC area. And I think that for those of you, and by the way, one of the people that supported the survey said to the researcher, oh, you don't need to worry about this area. We're okay, Muslims are okay, everyone likes us, we're good with the senators, we're good with all of the political people. But I think when we get to that result, you're going to be quite shocked. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brother Shahid Rahman from American Muslim Institution. And we're going to go through the survey. And if you have questions during the presentations, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and we can make this an interactive session. Jazakumullah khair, Brother Shahid.
Thank you, Brother Saif. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. First of all, I would like to thank Al-Hijrah and the community, the brothers, the sisters, and especially Brother Saif for inviting us here today to discuss this very important work that we are doing together as a community. But before I talk about the work, I wanted to just share a little bit about our organization and why we actually decided to undertake this. American Muslim Institution, we are focused on improving the image of Muslims in America. And a lot of the people here in this room have listened to the news, and sometimes the rhetoric toward Muslims is something that we're not comfortable with. And we're not sure exactly what percentage of the people feel this way, why they feel this way. So even before trying to improve the image of Muslims, we should try to understand what are some of the root causes and identify why people feel this way. Because you cannot solve a problem if you don't know the roots of the problem. And for that reason, we decided to partner with New America. Again, as Brother Saif mentioned, they're a left-leaning think tank that works on these very important issues. And I think this study is very relevant to 2018 United States of America and leading up to the midterm elections. So the timing could not have been better. Thank you. So first and foremost, we did a national survey, but we oversampled on 4 specific areas because we wanted to see the differences in places like Texas and Florida and the DC metro area. Today, we're just going to be looking at the DC metro area versus the US and how it compares. We'll start with the good news, we'll go into the bad news, and we'll talk maybe at the very end about how we can deal with this as a community together. So first and foremost, most Americans accept Muslim Americans. They think, okay, Muslim Americans, they are just like us. That potential exists. So we have over 2/3 of Americans. So this is the good news. Okay. So while he's working on that, while Brother Saif is working on the data, one of the things we asked the people were, you see the fact that there are so many Muslims running for office today. There's more than 100. I actually think that number is much, much higher because I'm originally from New Jersey, and I'm in a WhatsApp group where there's at least like 18, 20 people from New Jersey trying to run or planning to run, or on November 6th they're on the ballot. So I think that if that's a sample, I think the potential of Muslim Americans that are actually running for office is tremendously higher. And most Americans are actually quite accepting and glad to see that Muslim Americans are participating more in the political process. And I think you saw an indication of that today. You had Senator Tim Kaine here at the mosque earlier participate in the Jummah and the khutbah. How are we doing, Brother Saif?
I think we're getting there.
We're getting there, okay. Even in this area, you have quite a few people, I think, running for office. It's actually it's quite impressive. Maybe can you guys see it? Can you guys see the screen? Okay, they can see it. Maybe we can move on. Okay. That being said, most Americans do believe that Islam is compatible with American values. So one of the questions that in the future I would definitely like to ask people are, what do you think American values are? Is it democracy? Is it pluralism? Is it the freedom of press, speech? I think that's something that in the future we would definitely like to look into. And do you think that Muslim Americans can be as patriotic as other Americans? And that number is 60%. And I think one of the reasons that number is...
This is overall in the U.S.
Overall in the U.S. We haven't hit the D.C. metro area yet. And I think one of the reasons why we have this situation is you have such a large percentage of Muslim Americans as doctors. By some estimates, almost 10% of the population of medical doctors are Muslims. And there's over 19,000 people in the military that are of Muslim origin. So in a lot of key places, we are definitely represented. And I think that's helping. However, where do we have a concern? Or where do most Americans have a concern? That concern comes from, today you're my neighbor, that's not a problem. But is there a potential for Muslims to become radicalized? So you see that more than 50% of the people in America are concerned with radicalism, extremism spreading within the Muslim community. So yes, we know you. Today, you're a great person, but the concern is, what are you going to be tomorrow? So I think this is something we have to factor into the equation as we move forward. Perception today is good. Our marketing is good. The brand maybe needs some work. However, everything goes out the window when we talk about the Republican Party.
Brothers and sisters, I want you to look at these numbers up here very carefully.
I think this is very, very important. Brother Saif cannot probably highlight how important this is. 83% of those surveyed that believe, that at least identify as Republican, say they are concerned with extremism spreading in their communities, in the Muslim community, versus 56% of the general public. So if you're living in an area predominantly with Republicans, there is a very high probability, a 5 out of 6% chance, 5 out of 6 people might have the opinion that your extremism might spread. And 72% of Republicans do not believe that Islam is compatible with America. I mean, that's crazy. As someone who has grown up in a very, very Republican neighborhood in New Jersey, whose father served in the Marines, I think it's very troubling, these statistics. And I think one of the things we have to look at some point in the future is what are the roots and how do we really address this in a stronger way? And 60% of Republicans, again, do not believe Muslim Americans are as patriotic compared to other Americans, compared to 38% of the national average. Again, as someone whose father has served in the U.S. Marines, I don't mean Bangladeshi Marines or Pakistani Marines, this is amazing that someone can sacrifice, and this is the perception. 56% of people, Republicans in this country, are concerned with the mosque being built in their neighborhood, versus 30% and change in the rest of the country. And we see that. I think there is at least one or two examples, prominent examples in the Virginia area. Despite this area being extremely socioeconomically better than the rest of the country, you're still having these challenges.
And half disagree it's a positive sign.
Yes, half disagree it's a positive sign of progress for our country that over 100 Muslims are running for office. So even though the general public thinks it's great, we're becoming more civically engaged, more than half of the Republicans think it's problematic. And I suspect some of that has to do with this false notion of creeping Sharia.
Yeah.
I think this is something we should really pay attention to. Why? In light of what happened in Pittsburgh recently. One of the things you'll notice about hate is it doesn't stop with Muslims. You'll find that the people that have troubles and difficulties with Muslims or have bad feelings toward them, they also tend to have negative attitudes toward other communities. However, that being said, the perception of people that think that Jewish people face tremendous amounts of discrimination is very low compared to the actual reality. So most people think that Jews face the least amount of discrimination. However, statistics have shown year over year the amount of hate crimes toward Jewish people has increased substantially, more than any other group. So reality is not matching the perception.
But what's interesting is that 70% of those surveyed feel like Muslims are being discriminated against. So they know, that people know that there's discrimination.
Right. Yeah.
What is the blue and the black?
Sure. The black is the people that agree, and the blue is disagree.
So the question is, there is a lot of discrimination against Muslims. 70% said yes, 30% said no. Against transgenders, 68% said yes, 31% said no. Blacks, 67% said yes, 33% said no. Jews, 35% said yes, 64% said no.
And I think we'll touch on this maybe a little bit later, but it gives us a common point to reach out to our Jewish friends to discuss how do we deal with hatred and bigotry together. So most people acknowledge the fact that hate crimes exist within the community. They don't deny that the hate crime statistics are fake. They say, okay, most likely this is probably happening. So for example, 74% of Americans accept that there are hate crimes, accept the hate crime statistics about Muslims as victims. This is really fascinating, and if you have Twitter or Instagram, this is a very interesting statistic. One question that was asked of people, what percentage of the population of America do you think is Muslim? Anybody want to guess?
How many, what percentage, if you were to take a guess, what percentage? Yes? 6%. What else? Who else? 2? 5?
3?
20?
20.
10? Okay, I want you to realize the population of the United States of America is going to be 330 million people. 1% is 3.3 million. If you say 10%, that means 33 million Americans are Muslim. If you say 20%, that means 66 million Americans are Muslim. So I just want you to get that. So if you say that Muslims are 3 to 10 million, they are between 1 and 2% of the population.
Up to 2?
What?
5.
5%? 5% means that there are 15 to 20 million Muslims, and that's not the case. Okay, we won't discuss it now, but the vast majority of research says that it's been between 1 and 2%. You may be up to 5% if you want to take that. But let's think about that and let's see what the perception is.
So the perception, the average number of that was, when you look at everything together, the average was 16%. So the average American thinks 16% of America is Muslim. So that's more than, I would say, that's almost 50 million Muslims in America. That's the average American's perception of how many Muslims are in America. So I think it's a fraction of that. Can we agree that it's less than 50 million?
Yes.
Okay. 30 million? 10, 9.
Okay.
Close enough.
Yeah.
So this is really relevant for us here in this room. What is the perception of America toward Muslims versus what is the perception of your fellow DC metro area citizens of Muslims? So what you have is, for example, 53%, so the black is the national and the blue is DC metro area. So for example, this is very interesting statistic on the bottom left. Only 34% of people in the DC metro area claim to know a Muslim.
That's 1 in 3. Versus 50% nationally. 1 in 2. This is data.
So there are many reasons that could be the case. I mean, maybe people don't know who is a Muslim, who's not a Muslim. Oftentimes people are not saying, hey, I'm your doctor and I'm a Muslim. And I think as we do further research, I'm sure we'll have different data, but this is what this study is showing.
It could also be nationally that someone says, hey, I know Mohammed bin Salman because I see him on the news, right? So that may be, but the data is suggesting that nationally people are saying 51 and 2. Locally in the DC area, only 34% of people said they know a Muslim. That's 1 in 3 people.
But remember, there is a mix between Muslim and the Hindu sometimes. People will have this.
Right.
Yeah, so we didn't drill down for that.
Right. Also very interesting. So this area, the people are claiming not to know Muslims. Also, when you ask them what percentage of the population do you think is Muslim, whereas the national average, they think 16%. In this area, they think 18% are Muslim. So even more than 50 million.
Did you say
18.
8 0.
1-8.
Question here, because the Muslim there is a people which is naturalized citizens or just as a Muslim.
As a Muslim, in general.
How are you going to survey just because where in which location you survey? Some people maybe they don't see Muslims like some part of Maryland or some part of DC or Virginia.
So, right. So the surveys are done randomly in different places, in different areas, in order to gauge. I mean, how can I explain random sampling? Yeah.
Example, if I take you,
Sure.
I'm from Ethiopia.
Sure.
In Ethiopia, if you ask somebody, is there a Muslim in Ethiopia? They say maybe 10 million, maybe we are half of the population, almost 50 million.
Sure.
You see, perception is different. The people give you perceptions. If I
So this is dealing with perception, Akhi.
Right.
The idea behind this is for us to understand how our community is perceiving us, our greater community, your neighbors, your co-workers, your bosses, right? How do they perceive Muslims overall? When they made the calls to the people, the first question they ask, do you identify as a Muslim? If the answer is no, they say thank you, or they say thank
Yes.
you, let's continue. If they say yes, they say thank you very much, ma'as salama. Okay?
And finally, I think this is very interesting also. You have 74% of the residents here saying Muslims are contributing significantly somewhat to the U.S. economy versus 84% nationally. So nationally, they're thinking Muslims are contributing more to the economy versus this area. Again, some more troubling information. Muslims are as patriotic as Americans. So you have 60% nationally versus 50% in this area.
So our fellow DC residents don't think that we are, or 50% don't think we as Muslims are patriotic. 50%. That's 1 in 2.
And then,
Can you give us your perception or reflection about this? Why it came like that?
So we're revealing results and then we'll have a discussion after the result, inshallah. Yes? DC
Metro.
metropolitan area.
Metro.
Yes.
Another,
No, metro
no,
area.
just the DC metro area.
It's the metro area.
That's another study. Definitely think about drilling down, and maybe in the future we can think about that. So another question we asked, again, this is very relevant, and we saw some very prominent examples in this area. So how concerned are you with an Islamic center being built in your neighborhood? 33%, 33% of national average is concerned versus 50% of people in the DC metro area concerned with a mosque in their backyard being built. I think this young lady had a question. Yes.
We'll put it on our website, inshallah, and we'll put it on the Facebook page, inshallah.
Including all of the 300 pages of data of the survey questions.
Did they give the reason why? I mean, is it because of the behavior of the Muslims? Is it because of the...
They didn't drill down for this, Sheikh Abdullah. This is just the question.
Perception.
Would you be concerned if a mosque was built in your backyard? And the answer in the DC area, 50% said yes. Whereas nationally only 33%, 1 in 3 said yes. In the DC area, 50% said yes.
Again, and concerning extremism spreading in your community, 56% of America versus 68% in DC, DC metro area. So again, these are very troubling numbers, especially in an area where we perceive the people, or at least they're more socioeconomically better than the rest of the country, and there are better opportunities to get to know Muslims because you have such large centers and very active centers like yours. Comfortable with women in a veil, 29% of the country is comfortable versus 35% in this area, so that's good. Should Muslims be subject to extra security screening?
No, it's not good. They're uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
this area is more
Uncomfortable. Sorry, yes.
than the rest of America with a woman wearing a hijab. 35% of people in the DMV area are uncomfortable with our sisters who wear hijab. That's 1 in 3 people. Yes. No, it wasn't defined, Sheikh. It was just asked as extremism. The last 3 weeks?
It was done, I think, October 16th to 20th. So it was leading up to the election.
Yeah.
The most recent.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. We're going to get to a slide that shows what media people are consuming. Yeah, but the question is broad for a reason.
Right.
You just say American values,
Right.
right? So we didn't drill down further than that. Not yet. مجتمعك. No, and it's purposely that way. It's purposely that way because they are asking, let's say I come to you and I say, Hajj, do you think that Muslim Americans can do 1, 2, 3? Your answer is your perception of what a Muslim American is. It may differ than, one of the sisters' answers of what a Muslim American is. But the overall broad category of Muslim American is the same concept of what we perceive America, or as Americans are. So it's very broad, but it's the idea of whether they perceive Muslims as identifying as Americans. Does that make sense? Whether they include Muslims in the overall picture of what America is.
I think the other thing, this is the last piece of data I think on this slide we should take note of, is 50% of the people in the DC metro area do not think Islam is compatible with American values. This is the DC metro area. So I think national is 42%.
42%. So it's higher in
It's
this area.
right. I think as Muslim Americans, we have our work cut out for us to try to flip some of these numbers.
So it seems that with most of the repeatings, in this area it's always
Negative.
negative. I mean, not always. Yeah, that's favorable to us.
Right.
But still, you don't forget that it's the most diverse than compared to, national.
You mean Islam is the most diverse or the region? Yeah.
We have a lot of Muslims, we have Spanish, we have Chinese.
No, he's in. No, that's true. I think in terms of the most diverse religious community in America, Muslims are the most diverse by far. They're the most reflective of America. That being said, does everybody else know that? Does the general public know that? Or does the general public think that the foreigner is Muslim? Maybe the person that is speaking Arabic or from the Middle East. Whereas the reality, I think, only 2% of Muslims are from Saudi Arabia. So there is a perception of who is a Muslim, and there is definitely a gap. So we can open it up to questions. And I think one of the things that I think we should really talk about today and try to highlight is how do we move forward?
Just one of the, can you try to pull his?
Sure.
One of the issues on the media, the discovery was those people who had the most negative views of Muslim were not watching cable news. They were watching local news. So the people who had the worst perceptions of Muslims were watching local news media, not the cable news like CNN, even Fox and MSNBC and other programming.
The presentation's not there, just the data.
Okay.
So that's, I'm sure that's fascinating. Yes, Sister Fawzia.
just wanted to clarify, I think when I'm listening to these numbers, are you saying the sample itself was 1,700?
So the total sample nationally was about 1,165, of which, and then from that's 1,100 and change, and then we had another 150, around 150 in each area, oversampling.
And here's the breakdown.
It's a correlational study. It's not a scientific study.
No, it's a scientific,
No, it's
scientific sample.
Right.
It's a publishable study. So here's the breakdown of the people surveyed. 9% are Baptist, 20% are Roman Catholic, 1% are evangelical, 1% are Jehovah's Witnesses, 2% are Jewish, 3% are Lutheran, 1% are Mormon, 2% are Pentecostal, 2% Presbyterian, 4% Protestant, 1% Buddhist, and 1% Hindu. So you can see the breakdown. It's a pretty diverse religious breakdown, with the largest being Catholic or Roman Catholic, 20%. Huh?
That's also here. There should be a breakdown of ethnicity.
So, which of the following media outlets do you get your news from? This is the question you asked. Any, 96%. Local, 45%. Social media, 44%. And then you had under that CNN,
Cable.
MSNBC. CNN was 35, MSNBC was 22. And then you had in the newspapers, 21% New York Times, 13% Wall Street Journal, 7% Washington Times. And then radio, NPR was the highest, talk radio. Fox News was 32% under network news. Breitbart, 3%. Okay, so these aren't people that are necessarily following the right-wing news outlets. This is just general populace.
There was another study. This is based on this study. There was a specific study looking at focus groups of people that have negative views of Muslims. Focus groups of people that have negative views of Muslims. And they found similarly that most of these people consume news from their local affiliates because they trust them more. And in one sense, that's very good for the Muslim American community, because if you engage the local media, I think last week we had an event here where someone from essentially the National Association of Broadcasters, he said, if you engage the media, local affiliates, they are more than happy to take your feedback and adjust what they're doing, again, if it makes sense, if it's reasonable, if it's specific. So I think the one really great gem from this piece of information is there is a lot of power in your hand to adjust the perception of Muslims, because I think somebody asked about Muslims and media, and that does definitely have a role to play. There was a study done once looking at how negatively Islam was covered in one of the major papers, and it was covered more negatively than cancer. But the good news is most of the people are not maybe getting their information from the New York Times. The place they're getting it from is where we can have the most impact.
So this is the breakdown by political party of the people surveyed. 25% were Republican, 32% were Democrat, 37% were independent, 5% other, and 1% didn't answer, refused. 31% voted for Donald Trump, 36% voted for Hillary Clinton, 10% voted for a third party, 23% did not vote. 25% thought Donald Trump was doing a good job. 25% were thinking of good or very good. And 63% were fair and poor.
Can I add something on the Donald Trump issue? Again, you will have access to the data. The percentage of white males that think he's doing a very good job or good job is over 80% from this study. More than 80%.
I'm trying to find the data.
Race?
On race. Yeah, here we go.
Oh, there
Here's
you go.
the
There
race
you go.
data. So this is some more detail for why people believe that we are not compatible as Muslims. Incompatible cultural views, 50%. U.S. law and culture. So for example, will not assimilate, accept our values. They want to change or destroy our society, our way of life, 8%. Against us freedoms, against U.S. freedoms that Islam restricts, 8%. Not compatible with U.S. laws, 7%. Lifestyle, 7%. Not compatible with religion, 18%. So, I mean, just so that you get an idea, and we'll put this on the website, inshallah, so that you can see the background. 48% were male, 52% were female of those that answered. Let me just find the employed, unemployed.
That's all there.
Yeah, the
That's
age
all
group
there.
is here.
Age, tax
What
bracket,
is your
income is
age?
all here.
So the age groups were 2% 18 to 20, 7% 21 to 24, 10% 25 to 29, 30 to 49 1%, 30 to 34 12%, 35 to 39 8%. So you can see it's pretty diverse. What? I tried, brother. There you go. Jazakallah khair. No, this is not a... Okay, is that easier? Okay, sorry. Jazakallah khair, Kibri. 50 to 54, 7%. You can see the age groups. So the mean is 47. The median age is 47. The people that answered.
Let me frame it in a different way. You're right that a lot of the average Americans, they're seeing the news that is related to our community and some of the issues overseas. But if a lot of the people are consuming news locally, that means those are not necessarily issues that they're seeing again and again and again. They should be seeing some of the positive things you are doing. But that means that you have to reach out to them. Ultimately, if we can reach out to them and discuss the positive things we are doing, then perhaps we get more coverage, at least locally.
I want us to look at the race for a second.
I mean, you're referring to local news, you're referring to Fox locally, or to
Right.
CBS locally. You're referring
BBC.
it's part of the greater network that is doing this, because they need Channel 5, maybe Houston Channel 13, maybe. So it's still the umbrella under the larger things, and it is directed in a way. What I would like to see is specifically, why did they think of Muslim like that? Not a
So
general
we're going to work with ISPU,
question.
the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, to get another, we're going to do another one of these sessions, to do a follow-up with how Muslims perceive themselves and society. And then we're going to go further. So we're going to keep trying to understand our community and our society. But it's important that we don't generalize. This is data, right? And the data tells us that our greater community we have a problem with.
Can I just say something? Because I think that when we say like the masjid, we can justify that because we abuse the neighbors, we park, we do this, and you can see over the time things have changed. This is a behavior that we're in control. And I think we have to fix a problem, we have to get precisely to what the issue. So we have to be more digestible for you to come and say, okay, when you say in local media, it's not like Fairfax News.
Brother Abdullah, the problem is, I'm sorry I cut you off, but the problem is that the vast majority of Americans do not know an American Muslim. This is the problem. The vast majority of Americans do not know intimately an American Muslim. If each Muslim actually treated their neighbors as their guests, as their brothers or their sisters, as the Prophet ﷺ told us to. I'll give you an example, which is anecdotal. I mentioned my neighbor Chuck. Chuck is a retired Navy guy. Okay, so he's like Republican hardcore. And, you know, he voted for Trump. And then when I went to have a discussion with him, he came and said, he admitted something. So I'm his neighbor. He has another Palestinian Muslim brother on his other side. And he has a Pakistani brother across the street. So all his neighbors are Muslim. Okay? And I started talking with him and created a relationship with him. And he said, Saif, I've lived here for 30 years. And these other neighbors have lived here for 15 years. And do you know that none of them have talked to us ever? To the degree now that Chuck comes and asks me, hey, you know, Muhammad had a heart attack. Can you go check on him? Or his wife told me that to mow their grass because he's in the hospital. Can you figure it? So we don't talk to our neighbors and we don't do things with them. When his wife Jessica...
Please, let me cut you off. Because the reason is we have not invested for us. There's many Muslims. As he said, doctors don't tell you I'm a Muslim. They are too sharp. They've changed some of their name. They don't fit because there is a problem that, yeah, you did it. I can do it. Many people can do it. But I think we fail to create the Muslim identity to be honored and privileged. Say, I'm a Muslim.
Yes.
Not to be shy away from. I think you have to come up front and say, I'm a Muslim. And I think this, you know, when I say it, you say it, they say it, so they are used to us. Because many of if you make a survey, how many of our people working in departments, and they don't say I'm a Muslim.
So I think this is why the next event that you guys are planning with ISPU is so important.
Yes.
Because how do Muslims view themselves?
Yes, the next event has that.
That's very challenging. Again, not everyone holds their religion on their sleeves. And maybe you take Muhammad and you become Mo. Maybe you take Yunus and you become Jonah. I mean, this is, I think, some of the things that ISPU will be looking at. How do we perceive ourselves? And you're definitely right.
Yeah, but we're not doing it systematically as a community. And it's something easy to do that solves so much. But, and we need to educate our community about doing it. We shouldn't be embarrassed to teach, right, the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ with our neighbor. And we can use events to do it. There are many opportunities with neighbors that you can actually interact during Ramadan, during celebrations, whatever it may be, but there are opportunities for teaching. Every Ramadan, we prepare dates for all of our neighbors, and we have a little bit of a note, and we say, it's the beginning of Ramadan and we wanted you to have what we have to break our fast, and we have a little explanation. So now all of our neighbors, they know when Ramadan starts. The idea is we need to foster this as a community, and the masjid needs to open up more. This masjid wasn't open until 9/11. This masjid, one of probably the most active masajid in the United States, wasn't open until 9/11. And we need to open more. And even since 9/11, it's been 18 years. We had someone kick a guest out today. 18 years later. So we have a lot of work to do, yes.
Brother Najid, referring to some Muslims' behavior of hiding their identity in the closet as a reaction to generic discrimination in the society. That's a reaction, especially from fresh immigrants. On the other side, established immigrants show it with honor. And that's my take on the survey, that these people who are surveyed here, most of them belong to upper middle class, and they have education, they have what they need in life, based on even the newspapers mentioned that they read. This is where they get the news, and it also confirms the rising of extremist right-wing, they call them nationalists now, that despise fresh immigrants regardless of race, color, religion. This is not limited to Muslims, because Islam is a software. you can't point to someone's religion based on looks, or language, or national origin, or race.
Yes.
So how do they know that this is a Muslim they despise? They just despise fresh immigrants because this is the majority in our metro area, similar to other metro areas in the US, while the survey encountered urban neighborhoods with usually lower level of education tax bracket than our metro area, where they encounter Muslims as doctors, professors, engineers.
So here's the challenge.
They look at them with pride. They serve the community.
So here's the challenge. What do we do? As a community, what do? We see this data. So what can we do as a community to change perceptions? I mentioned the neighbor thing, but this is a single effort. I'm talking as a community. What can we do together? What is it that we need to do so that we can change some of the perceptions that we discussed? Let me just take Brother Abdullah. Can I talk to you, Brother Abdullah?
As you said, after 9/11, Darfur opened up and it was a nightmare. You go into people and you say, I'm an American, they tell you, where were you before? And I think today we still have a problem thinking of ourselves as Americans. And I think that's the obstacle we have to overcome. And you can just act as a natural Muslim. You don't have to do anything special. Just be kind, be nice, do your role as an honest, truthful Muslim that you care for your neighbor. Our purpose as a Muslim, we want everybody to enter the Jannah. We're not doing a good job. You know, we're pushing people away from Islam because of our attitude, our behavior, our things. I went into the Jewish funeral in this, and we went to church, and there is a Jewish community in there, and I sent an email because I felt bad as a human being for what happened. And I don't think that we show those emotions because that would happen to us. We would be crying. I think we need to start understanding that Islam, that we have to be that way. We have to be that kind of people. We need to show it. If we don't show it, we're going to sit here 20 years from now, we're singing the blues.
I think I would like to add maybe 2 points. First, I want to address what you're saying. What do we do? I've done a couple of events, and I've met with some very interesting people that are in very good positions. What I have found is when they really get to know you and they share a meal with you and they have a private opportunity to ask you a question, they will ask you questions that they are maybe not comfortable with. I did an event in Maryland in a very, very, you can say, liberal area. After the program, somebody walked up to me and said, is it true, when they felt they were comfortable, nobody was there, that the Quran says you can kill Christians? This is in Maryland. And I did a program, and they walked up to me and said to me afterward when they thought no one was there. I said, no, of course not. When they're comfortable, they will discuss a lot of things. I think one of the things that we have to think about is how do you develop an ambassador program, essentially, to have people that can articulate some, maybe, I don't want to say controversial, but navigate some of the things that people might not understand about Muslims or Muslim culture or people from Muslim countries, predominantly Muslim countries. I think that's something that people are not able to understand well enough. One of the things I always joke with my friends, and a lot of the organizations that I know, they are most of the people that are running them, they're older, and maybe they're born in another country. And I always say, the first thing you need to do if you hire somebody new is sensitivity training to understand what America is and to understand the culture. Because if you can't understand the culture, it is very difficult to do any form of understanding and dialogue with the community. You're speaking one language, they're speaking another language, and it's challenging. As far as are we Americans, this is where demographics, and I think the brother all the way at the back talked about something very interesting. Is it racism that is pushing us in a direction, or is there something inherent in us? The majority of Muslims in America, my friends, 52% of them are under the age of 30 years old. This is from last year's data. 2017 Pew Research. This is the most prestigious. That's one. Number two, most Muslims are immigrants. Almost 2/3 of Muslims are immigrants in this country. So we are young and we are immigrant. What is a challenge that all immigrants face, irrespective of being Muslim or being Christian? They have to adjust to this country. Statistics, data, psychology shows Muslims suffer from higher levels of acculturation stress. So younger Muslims have more stress living in society. Why? One of the reasons is because their parents are saying something at home and they see something very opposite at school. They see something opposite on television. They see something opposite here. And it's so difficult, and I grew up in this country, and I can only share my experience. It's very difficult as an American Muslim. You are hearing one thing at home, and you are seeing one thing at school. And navigating that stress, it has led to American Muslims having more stress than any other immigrant groups. And most of the time, people don't even understand, brothers. Let me give you a simple example. Usually, the people that are coming from dominantly Muslim countries or more conservative societies, our parents teach us, when you go to your room, you change your clothes, you close the door. It's shame, right? Well, at least in Bangla, the word is sharam, shame. However, everyone sends their kids to school. In school, there's gym. In gym, everybody changes in front of everybody. You taught your kids shame, but in school, everybody becomes ashamed of being ashamed. The process it's not just about racism or what other people are pushing toward. It's just everything in general is very difficult. Does that mean now we should say no more gyms for our kids? No. Quran says, Amr bin Maruf, Nahy anil Munkar. First, you promote good. So you make your gym, you have a nice gym here, you create the system that you're happy with. You put the curtains. So, I mean, this is something that we have to think about. And this issue of us as Americans, I think most of the kids that are growing up here, I'm very close to that age. I don't know anything else. I only know, despite not being born in this country, I only know America.
Do you remember post 9/11, the sleeper cell case in Detroit? It was all over the news. Did anybody knew what was the outcome of that case? The persecutor is in jail because he made up the case. But every American at that time think of Muslim as foreign agents who are sitting here waiting for the opportunity to kill us. I was asked that question when I was working for 8 years in the same place, and they know me. One person came and said her husband asking her, and she's a bit disturbed, would the day come when I'm coming to work and start killing everybody?
Wow.
The media bring those stereotypes, and the outcome of that nobody knows. Like, do you remember when George Bush was being re-elected? He put Dr. Ashkar and he said all these are terrorists.
Yeah.
And that's all over the news. So that's where the Americans are getting their news from.
Yeah, so the way to counter that, Doctor, again, is the personal interaction, right? And that's what I'm saying. The more people we can bring into the masajid, the more we as Muslims can get out of the masajid to the community, the better we will have in terms of perception. But I have to tell you, working in outreach here at Al-Hijrah now for 10 months has been very difficult. To get our brothers and our sisters to do some of the simplest things, it's so difficult to get volunteers to come and help with activities. And honestly, it makes it very difficult for us to do that, because instead of going to 2 events because we're 2 people, or 3 events because we're 3, we could be going to 10 events if brothers and sisters would volunteer and help us push some of the agenda. Or we have more events here at Al-Hijrah. So we need to create a core team that is an outreach team here at Dar al-Hijrah that focuses on civic engagement with the politicians, that focuses on meeting with the interfaith partners. For example, tomorrow, people are going to Adams Center. There's two things happening tomorrow. At Vienna Library, there's a program called Know Your Muslim Neighbor. And this is a program that was developed by some brothers and sisters to actually introduce Islam to people. And alhamdulillah, we've had many people come through. That's happening tomorrow. Also tomorrow is an outreach event walking around District 10, which is one of the most contested congressional districts in this race between Barbara Comstock and Jennifer Wexton. And Muslims will be walking around just knocking on people's door saying, hello, make sure you go vote. Just that simple interaction will make a difference, inshallah. So if there's anything that you take away from tonight, take away that we really need to come together and agree how we can together work towards improving our image as a masjid, as a community. And this is not a Dar al-Hijrah thing, this is the Muslim community as a whole. Because this is not focused on Dar al-Hijrah, this is the American Muslims overall. Yes, sir.
To be honest with you, we have a behavior problem. We have to be clear. This Friday, every Friday, if somebody stands at the corner of this road, in the back, the Muslims, after they pray, we Muslims, after we pray, fighting, yelling each other.
Yeah.
Believe me, if this neighborhood, if this is masjid, you ask to establish today, I don't think they're going to allow us. This is good neighborhood, to be honest with you. Because I park far away, I walk, I try to guide them here. The people yelling each other, like one is blocking, he don't like to move in. Yeah. How come we are Muslim, you pray Jummah, you go out and yelling each other?
So we're coming to make salah, and in the process of coming to make salah, we are creating a greater mafsada. Right? You know the fiqh, we know dar al-mafsada tuqaddam ala jalb al-maslaha. This is a basic qaida, a basic principle of usul al-fiqh. To prevent a harm is always favored over getting a benefit. So you're coming to make salah and you're creating a harm in the process of coming to make your salah. And this is the reality. Today I was driving in the neighborhood and I saw how many of my brothers were parked in people's driveways, for example. But anyway, let's come back inshallah to this issue. Yes.
I just in the comment on the study, there is a way to change this misconception, like Brother Hijrah doing like a booklet, hand booklet or something small, about this conception about Muslims and the answer for this. Maybe we take the active role and we say...
Are you volunteering?
I can work with this.
Okay, we'll work together. Who else will volunteer with you, brother? Come on, one other. All right, sister, mashallah.
Oh, she has a question.
No, I thought you were volunteering. So, I'm going to make an announcement that I'm probably going to get in trouble for because we're still planning. This is still in the planning. But inshallah, next year, in 2019, we are going to have a roadmap. In 2019, on the entrance here and in the entrance on the sister side, we're going to have a roadmap. It will say, this is our goal for this year in terms of education. This is where our community is. This is where we want to get. And these are the milestones that we want to hit. And that will help with what you're talking about in terms of events. We'll have the major events on this roadmap, inshallah. And we're planning to have this so that it's quarterly. You'll see the progress of what's happening, inshallah. Because I'll tell you very frankly, I left this community in 2002. When I went overseas to Egypt to study, and I lived in Iraq for 6 years after that. And I was very disheartened that I came back in 2018 and I saw some of the issues that existed in 2002. it's disheartening to see that we haven't made the progress that we need to make as a community. So inshallah, we're still working the issues around it. We're going to have a meeting very soon, the executive. But the idea is to have a roadmap that the community sees by the end of the year where we want to be, inshallah. And I think we'll end with that. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallahu wa bihamdik. May Allah reward Brother Shahid for joining us tonight.
Ameen.